Governments around the world are tightening regulations on digital platforms, reshaping the way video games are created, distributed and played. Let's head to the US now. We're joined by Chris Hewish from Xsolla. Chris, good to have you on the program. Talk to us about how these tech regulations are changing the game when it comes to monetization and distribution.
Certainly, Aaron. So we've had quite a few changes recently. We've had court rulings in the United States, including a recent one where the Supreme Court declined an emergency request from Google to change some rules. So now Apple, Google, and all gatekeepers in the US and now also throughout Europe and the rest of the world with other regulations are being forced to open up their platforms to allow developers to be able to direct players off platforms, use alternative billing, get full access to the data of their players and what's happening. And this is creating real opportunities to drive new business models and a lot more business opportunity for developers worldwide.
Yes, just talk to us about that. How is it leading to that opportunity?
So developers are now actually, before some of these rules, whether they were regulations like the Digital Markets Act or anti-steering rules in the US, gatekeepers were prohibiting developers from actually telling their players or their users that they could go outside of the platform and engage for better value propositions, for direct relationships with the developers themselves or the publishers, and also to use alternative billing or payment systems. And all of this was forcing developers to stay within these closed ecosystems, pay high fees in the neighborhood of 30% of all their revenue for transactions, and lose out on all of their data. And this was really keeping these developers from getting a full picture of what was happening within their business. But now they can actually put their players outside of the app stores, outside of the platforms. They get increased margins. They're able to use all of the power of e-commerce, understand their users better, and drive better value both for their users, but also increase their bottom lines through increasing the revenue that they're actually receiving.
Yeah, and talk to us about the idea of the rule changes for alternative payments, what that's actually doing as well.
So currently, or before some of these changes went into effect, these regulations and these legal cases, the app stores or the platform holders themselves would dictate what payment methods the developers had to use. So they were having to use the platform payment methods, and they were really limiting the coverage that was possible around the world. And these platforms maybe had a hundred or a few hundred payment methods integrated into them, when the reality is there's thousands of payment methods worldwide when you get into alternative payments and all of these things. And it was meaning that a lot of players around the world were actually not able to transact with their favorite apps. And now that developers can let those players know that there's options off platform, they actually are able to engage with much larger audiences.
What about the privacy laws as well? How are the developers managing these different privacy laws across different regions? Because Europe's very different to everywhere else at the moment.
Certainly. So in Europe, you have some, privacy laws that are in effect with the DSA and the Online Privacy Act in the UK. But you do have things that are making it important for developers to think about privacy. And now that they're able to go off platform, this is even more important that they start to properly adhere to these different privacy rules. And the onus is on the developers now if they're going to go off platform. But that's not necessarily a bad thing, because it also means that they actually have access to all of their data. They just need to think about privacy now more as a feature in what they're building. And luckily for them, fortunately, there are plenty of businesses that have been doing this for a while that can provide privacy as a service, help them make sure that they stay compliant.
And talk to us about the pressures that safety laws are actually putting on multiplayer game design.
So a lot of these rules are actually focused on things like creating safe environments, non-toxic environments. And again, this is something that now developers are really taking seriously. So on the one hand, it's creating more work that they may have to do up front early on in their design to take this seriously. But the result is now that these things are being viewed as a feature and a requirement, they're creating better overall experiences for gamers around the world when you're looking at the game apps and whatnot. And safer experiences, better experiences, less toxicity, that those lead to a better overall experience for the users, which keeps people coming back and keeps them engaged longer. So it's actually better for the business in the long run. It's just now developers have to actually think about this, as I said, upfront earlier in their development and build it into their games in a way that they hadn't before. And this is spurring a lot of innovation when it comes to using AI around AI moderation, real-time moderation, building systems that actually promote better, more inclusive communities and environments. So the net result is good. It's spurring some new innovation. So it's a win-win, I think, in the end.
All right, we'll leave it there for now. Chris, thanks so much for your time. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Aaron.